the top organization in this country working on affordable housing, and has been for decades, is the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. The table forward, Sheila, if you're ready to make some remarks.
Sure. So I just wonder how many people here went to the Housing Now March? Very good, very good. It was a great event. It was a huge crowd, and there was a strong sense of possibility that came from that. And as we know, not long after that, the National Affordable Housing Act of 1990 was passed that created the home program, designated the requirement for the CHAZ, if you want to get really wonky, and that led to the requirements for local planning. So, so it had an important effect. But here we are 25 years later, we still have homelessness in the United States, and our shortage of affordable housing for the lowest income people remains worse than it was in those days, and with no sign of abating anytime soon. And that's on one hand, that's a discouraging statistic and a discouraging experience. On the other hand, it requires that you get up every morning and put one foot in front of the other and keep working at it, because there are solutions. We have solutions. We know what to do. What we have to do is organize enough to be able to convince the powers that be that this is what they should do, including the president. It would be really good if the president picked up our message. Let me just say a quick thing about the intersection of housing and poverty. I come from the world of social work and community-based organizing, community-based service delivery. I came to housing by understanding that without housing, the good, solid, affordable, decent housing, all of the work that we did to help people on many other fronts was not going to be successful. We weren't going to be able to achieve what we wanted to achieve if people didn't have a good place to go home to at the end of the day, that they could afford and that was stable and that they could raise their children in. There was a really important study that was done in Boston by some social workers, social work faculty, who looked at the records of a large number of families who had been cases at nonprofit family practice kinds of places, clinics, social worker clinics, to look at what were the factors that contributed to social work effectiveness for what they called very hard to reach families. And there were families with lots of problems, lots of issues. And so they did this, really fancy regression analysis. They threw all these factors into it. And at the end of the day, the thing that impeded the ability of the social worker and the clients to work together towards success, the single most important factor was their lack of affordable, decent homes. It had nothing to do with the skills of the social worker, had nothing to do with all of the other problems that the folks brought to the table, including very serious poverty. The single largest factor was the lack of housing. And so it became clear to me that housing was where I needed to go. And then I got to Washington and I start working on housing, and it's like, you have to hang out with bankers. And you have to talk about housing finance. And you have to talk about, you have to deal with a lot of landlords and people who, for whom housing is a business, housing is an industry. It's not a human intervention. And that's a very different world to operate in. And I think part of the reason that we have such a hard time making the translation from understanding how serious an impact on families are that we don't have decent housing is that so much of the housing debate is governed by and led by people in the world of commerce and see housing as a commodity as opposed to a social good. So it's a very difficult world to straddle and to try to bring this message into that. I think at the National Income Housing Coalition, we have worked very hard to try to be that voice in both sectors, both in the housing sector about how essential we have to work on housing for the lowest income people. But believe me, we're not always popular. And I know that we can be this kind of garden party when you go to some of these meetings and say, wait a minute, how deeply targeted is this program? Well, how much of this is going to go to really poor people? Don't tell me it's affordable, you know, that's a very global term, but how much of it's really going to go to poor people? And then you go to other sectors where you've got people working on human needs and housing isn't necessarily on their radar. And so it's a world that we have to figure out how to bring together more closely. I am just really delighted to be here today with my friend Jerry Jones. I just did cartwheels when I heard that Jerry was going to work for my friends at the National Coalition for the Homeless, and I expect great things of you. Thanks.